here we go. Hi, I'm David with EV World News. We're talking about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. I'm here today in studio with our founder and chief editor, Bill Moore. How's it going, Bill?
It is going fantastic. I had a great weekend.
Oh yeah, I was at a tennis tournament in Tulsa,
That's right.
and it was blazing hot down there, but I made it through. I ended up between two of my matches, I did an IV drip that was like a
Yeah.
B12 cocktail with some other things, and it was my first time I'd ever tried it. In fact, one of the things that was kind of interesting, they said, tell us if you get cold. And the heat index was about 109, and that doesn't include the extra temperature reflected off the tennis court
Oh
and
yeah.
being in the
Yeah.
direct sunlight. So it was really hot. I had a 2 hour and 55-minute 3-set match for my first match against a team from Kansas City. And
Wow.
I had my first match and we won, but it was one of those things where I knew I had to play again later that day and I wasn't sure. So I went and I did this IV treatment and that was pretty cool. But you got to go to the air show and that was
I
pretty
got to
fun.
go to
I
I got to, of course, we have, as we've mentioned on a number of occasions, that we live within, just a few miles from Offutt Air Force Base.
in the nuclear blast radius.
Well, yeah, easily within the nuclear blast radius. Yeah, I mean, these are the guys that basically, at least as I'm not sure what their focus is now, but originally at one point, of course, it was the head of Strategic Air Command, which is where all of the bombers and missiles and everything was controlled out of. And then they had, mission changes and things. And now it's under the 55th Air Wing or something like that. And I think what they're doing, part of that, of course, is that they do aerial, spying, right? They've got airplanes that have all kinds of crap hanging from it, and they fly, only the crew and God knows where, and they eavesdrop, do electronic, eavesdropping things, and then they also have what they call the Doomsday Command Post, which is the big 747 that's equipped
See that all the time.
replace the Pentagon. So they got those guys, but then I think they also do some things with regard to targeting of missiles and so let's put it this way: we're probably pretty high on the list of people that an enemy would like to take out.
Yeah, no, I get that. So yeah. I know I saw the Thunderbirds practicing. Did a B-2 do a flyby?
I did not. There was no B-2 when I was there.
I just would have been cool because I've been fortunate to be out in the yard when they've come through, and man, what an amazing sight to see in person.
Yeah. So I was there as a representative of our local Experimental Aircraft Association chapter 80, and we had a couple of aircraft there, a Van RV-12 and our president's full-scale replica of a 1918 Newport 28 biplane fighter, including guns, although they were mock guns. They weren't real guns and things. But he built this, took him 8 years to build it, and he built this thing not from kit. Many of these airplanes, like the Van, come as kits, and you buy part of the kit and assemble it, and you buy the next part of the kit and so on. This he built from paper plans. Right. Wow. That's all he had were their paper plans, and built this thing. And he's been flying it, he said, for about 8 years. And this year he took it over to Oshkosh, which little single seat biplane, right, with a much more dependable engine than the old Roan engines or whatever they had in them. And he took them all the way over to Oshkosh and back, which is remarkable. But he is a contract pilot instructor, so he has a lot of flying time, and he teaches other pilots how to be pilots and fly this stuff. So anyway, it was a great time. I got there, at around 7:30 in the morning, and was able to clear the security. And there's a lot of security. There are a lot of guys going around with big guns hanging off their shoulders, which you can appreciate. It's been 6 years since we had the last air show, in part not only because of COVID, but because we had that horrible flooding that literally took out the south
Right.
half of the runway. So they had to completely rebuild the runway. They had a lot of their buildings with documents and records and things destroyed. So that all had to be replaced. But yeah, I had a great time talking to people, and I was the unofficial. I appointed myself the unofficial recruiter for the chapter. So I was handing out little information cards and things. So I had a great time. There was lots of sunshine. I left just as it was starting to get warm, and just as all the crowds were starting to pour in. I
All
was
right.
going.
Well, Bill, we'll go ahead and we'll move on
Let's
since
move on.
we've got quite a few people watching. They probably don't want to listen to us just talk
They
about
don't
the
want to
air
listen.
show, but
No.
yeah, I'm still a little jealous. But anyways, first off, we're going to talk about a deal going on with Fisker's liquidation. If somebody needs a wall box EV charger for their garage, they can get
Yep.
one for half price right now.
Yeah.
And so they're normally about $500. You can get one for about $250 right now if somebody needs to pick up a charger. And this is part of Fisker filed for bankruptcy in June. Their remaining inventory is being sold off to help raise some cash. And let's see, the Fisker wall box available for $249, down from its normal price of $549. So yeah, they probably have to do a little searching for the Fisker branded wall box Pulsar Plus, but it's available result from a 2022 partnership between Fisker and Wallbox, and it's a very well-reviewed charger. Comes with a NEMA 14-50 plug, and if you already have one of those outlets in your garage, you don't even need to call an electrician. That's kind of interesting.
That would be, yeah. Well, are we getting any revenue off of this? No.
No, but I thought that's pretty cool, a little public service announcement, because people a lot of times ask. I've had a lot of people ask, where can they go to get the $4,000 tax credit and different things like that on cars, and you just never know where that's going to go. Okay, you had a funny article. I didn't get a chance to review it, but it's titled "Congress Wants to Change How SUVs Look." Did you look at this at all?
No, I did not. I spent most of my morning reviewing what the heck a thorium reactor is. So I can tell you all about thorium, but I can't necessarily tell you about this one. So let's go over.
We'll discuss that next. So Jim Farley warned American consumers about the future of the American auto industry. That's the CEO of Ford, obviously. He said to increase EV adoption rates, Americans will have to commit to a type of car that's far from the bread and butter of Ford's U.S. operations, a suggestion that sounds downright un-American to many consumers. We have to get back in love with smaller vehicles.
Yeah.
It's super important for society and for EV adoption.
Absolutely.
I mean, everybody could drive Hummers. I mean, they are expensive, but why couldn't everybody drive something with a 220 kilowatt hour battery pack?
That's right. Yeah. Why don't we all drive Titanics?
Right. But, and he's saying Americans are madly in love with big full-size SUVs like the Expedition, the Navigator, the Tahoe, and the Suburban, and the Jeep Wagoneer. Man, you start seeing these new Jeep Wagoneers, they're just as big as a Suburban, they look like.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But part of this is, we've talked about this before, there's that section of the tax code, the section 179, where businesses can get a write-off for having a vehicle that's heavy enough that qualifies for the tax credit. And all those vehicles qualify for that tax credit. So there's incentives. The government is incentivizing purchasing those ultra large vehicles. And that's a lot of the popularity of that. So you have people who are self-employed, business owners, different things like that. They're buying these for the tax write-off. And it's a simple choice. That's why a lot of them buy that rather than smaller vehicles.
Yeah, well,
but Congress,
we have to start getting serious about reviewing, our expectations. And I hate to say it. No, I don't hate to say this. I'm pleased to say it, that, we need to. Do we really, when you look at how people drive, most people drive these the big vehicles you're talking about. How many times are there more than one person in that car, that vehicle?
At least half the time it's just once.
It's just one person, right? And of course I look at my little Fiat 500D and I think, God, that is really a small car, but particularly when I parked in a parking lot next to, something comparably really big. And I think, but it gets me and my wife where we need to go. It does it cheaply. It does it in a fun way. It's sporty. What's not to like about it? And it doesn't have to be a Sherman tank. Now,
No,
obviously, people are going to think, well, yeah, but I want it for safety. Well, I can understand that, but a lot of the engineering anymore on these vehicles, they're taking all that into consideration. These vehicles are pretty doggone safe as they're being engineered now with airbags and the way the frames are designed and things. So I don't know. I really hope people will. Of course, I'm a big enthusiast of electric bikes for that matter. So that's about as lightweight and practical as you can get. So what are they? What are they saying? How they want the government to
on
encourage
Friday,
smaller ones?
the 23rd, Congress lawmakers introduced a bill requiring federal standards for automobile hood height and visibility to protect pedestrians and other vulnerable people using the roadways. And it was introduced. The idea was to make it easier for people to see pedestrians. It would also expand that of pedestrians, bicycles, and people outside the vehicle. Now, vehicles with high front ends and blunt faces, like tall SUVs and pickup trucks, pose a 45% higher risk of killing pedestrians they hit.
Wow.
Well, that seems to gain. I remember years ago having a Chevy Yukon and how expensive the insurance was in it. And the reasoning was the Yukon does a lot of damage to things it hits. It's not
Yeah.
that it was expensive to protect the Yukon itself. Whereas that's the opposite argument on EVs, is that EVs are often expensive to insure because of the cost of repairing the EV itself.
Right.
And because otherwise they're relatively safe. I mean, the vehicle is considered to be the safest in the world right now is the Tesla Model Y. So it's interesting to see where that goes. And the Y is not super large.
No, and we have to talk about what I just posted this morning about crashes. Which vehicles have the highest crash rate? You'll find that interesting.
Yep. And I do have that in today's lineup.
Okay,
So
good.
anyways, let's move up. Let's talk about thorium reactors.
Oh my goodness. So I came across a story where it's talking about the Chinese government is going to be building the world's first molten salt thorium reactor in the Gobi Desert. Now, what's unusual about that, first of all, because most light water reactors, the kind of reactors that we have, generating power for our utility companies, need to be located near large sources of water. In our case, we've got the Missouri River out here, and we got two plants that were located along that. One is active, one has been shut down. But typically, it has to be near a body of water to do the cooling. How do you build a nuclear reactor in the middle of the desert? Well, that's the beauty of the thorium reactor. And so I got to thinking. So I've become a greatly enamored with Pi AI. This is a augmented what would you anyway? It's an artificial intelligence computer program that I can ask it anything and it answers me back if I want in a language of or in a voice timbre of my choice. So I started off by asking it, what is thorium, and where does it come from and how is it made? And then I got into this whole thing. So the thorium reactor basically it uses a different type of uranium. And I don't want to go into details. In fact, I sent you earlier, if I haven't looked at, by the time I got done asking Pi these questions, it gave me pages and pages and pages of, I could probably turn it almost into a mini book. But so the reactor is, the sales point here is that it should be safer to build because you don't need to have water to suppress, any kind of a runaway thermal like you had in Fukushima and that type of thing, or in over with the reactor in Russia. So it's safer, should be less expensive to build, and the waste byproducts are less toxic for are less toxic and for a shorter period of time. Typically, the waste of a nuclear reactor will be something, thousands of years before it becomes safe. In the case of the thorium reactor, they're saying it's only 500 years. Still longer than the history of America, but it's only 500 years, right? So
Right.
it has some advantages. But then I got to asking it about all kinds of, well, where does thorium come from? You know where it comes from? Sand. And particularly in the US case, sand out of South Carolina and northern Florida. And so you can process this sand. I thought, well, what the heck is molten salt? Well, molten salt can be and typically is lithium fluoride and beryllium fluoride, right? And you make that as a liquid, and then you take and you grind up into very, very fine powders. I think this is how it works. And you infuse that into these polymer, or not polymers, but these this molten salt, and then you add a little bit of uranium 233 or something, like 235. I don't know. It goes through this process where it keeps changing states as you mix it together, and then you run it through the reactor. But it sounds promising. At least if you're talking about the problem, of course, is that it does have waste. And
but once again, one of my big things, Bill, we look at, does the investment in one of these thorium reactors, how does it compare to, say, coal or solar or wind?
That all depends on how. Yeah, well, again, I think you make a very valid point. I think it's going to probably be a lot more cost effective than a coal-fired plant, because coal, you just have to keep burning it and burning it and burning it, and then you got to deal with the waste from that, and that right. Stuff is toxic. So from that perspective, much of the material in the molten salt that they use in these can be refined and extracted and reused. So there are advantages. So anyway, I got a real education. I don't want to bore everybody because it go on for pages, but it's a fascinating technology. Can't say I'm totally convinced. I'm still somewhat of a skeptic on the value and the cost of nuclear, but
Mike and I talk about this a lot on the Wednesday show, because it just seems that nuclear seems like it should almost be free energy, but it's more expensive to produce at the moment than wind. And and it's because of all of the safety protocols and the number of people that have to be employed and things like that detract from the value of nuclear. And because we certainly don't want another unsafe nuclear incident, although most of us can name all three major nuclear incidents that there have been in the last 50 years, and although I don't know that 3 Mile Island was really that major.
I learned to ski quite literally across the Susquehanna from the 3 Mile Island plant while it was under construction.
Oh, wow. That's kind of cool. Anyways, so let's segue from this into U.S. grid and batteries. So right now, the U.S. grid is adding battery storage at a rate of 10 times what it's adding natural gas expansion in the first half of 24. Now, if you look at the way our grid is powered, coal makes up somewhere around 19% of the U.S. power needs.
I think it's a little higher than that.
I think it just dropped below 20. It just dropped below 20 this year. And LNG is like 41 or 42% of the grid. And then nuclear is also around 18 or something like that. And then the rest of it is surprisingly a mix of solar, wind, and a little bit is hydro. We don't have a ton of hydro in the United States, but we have a little bit. I think hydro is like 1% of U.S., whereas in some countries it's 99% of power generation. So
Canada being an example, and Norway,
But U.S. grid adds batteries at 10 times the rate of natural gas. Now, if you were going from nothing to 10, that'd be a huge number. But let's see if it gives us some actual numbers. 20 gigawatts of new capacity was added just in the first half of this year, and solar accounts for 60% of that. Two projects went live, rated over 600 megawatts of capacity, one in Texas and the other in Nevada. Now, I remember we talked a while back about Nevada replaced a big coal-fired power plant with, they actually put the batteries right on the site of the old coal plant.
Yeah, makes sense.
And we know that Hawaii went from coal to battery in the past year as well. So U.S. saw 4.2 additional gigawatts of battery capacity during this same 6 months, 20% of the new total capacity. Batteries are treated as the equivalent of a generating source by the EIA, since they can dispatch electricity to the grid on demand, even if they can't do it continuously. Texas and California alone accounted for 60%. Throw in Arizona and Nevada, and you're at 93%. So the rest of the U.S., so 46 other states only accounted for 7% of that capacity. But still, it's a big showing on growth of batteries. And part of it, we talk a lot about how, people think that EV batteries are going in the trash. And in reality, like from Texas, when Tesla gets a recycled EV battery, they throw it into storage on their own facilities.
Yeah.
So they keep expanding the battery storage of their own facilities simply by doing that. All right, let's cover a really brief topic. Let's talk about, and I was surprised this got as much press as it did, but Tesla introduced a new color, this Quicksilver color, and they're getting a lot of press over it because it's a pretty impressive color for them. And because if you've seen any silver Teslas, for the most part, they've been really wraps for the most part, I believe. So anyways, here's a Tesla Model 3 Highland in the Quicksilver color here. Let me see if I can make it any bigger. A little bit bigger.
You know where that comes from? I have to.
What's that?
The comic character from the Fabulous Four. Is it the Fabulous Four? I think, and their nemesis, I think, is called Quicksilver. Basically, it's kind of like the Terminator that can, morph. He basically looks like,
well, that's what I was thinking
Mercury. Yeah. So Quicksilver, I bet that's what this is. They named it this to go after that, that comic. I don't know which universe, Marvel or whoever it is, but a DC character. But yeah, that would make sense. I mean, it's a pretty color, sure is.
All right, here's some news, because we've been seeing where BYD has been moving into Canada and Mexico, and I was kind of surprised by this news today.
Yeah,
Canada adds 100% tariff for extraordinary threat of Chinese EVs. 100% tariff on Chinese-made EVs follows the U.S. EV incentives only apply to free trade partners. Mexico remains a potential U.S. entry point for Chinese automakers. So it's very similar language as the U.S. Canada announced a 25% tariff on Chinese steel and aluminum starting in October. And Canada took its actions versus China a step further than the U.S., limiting eligibility of Chinese EVs for all federal EV incentives to those that have negotiated free trade agreements with Canada, with no limitations on final assembly or battery and mineral sourcing requirements. U.S. firms eyeing commercial use or leasing and purchasing Chinese vehicles subject to the new tariffs would appear to still be eligible to get $7,500 or more back via the EV leasing loophole. So I think that was kind of surprising news, because I was kind of expecting we were going to see a flood of Canadian license plated BYDs.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that's what the White House was thinking, and probably put a call through to Canada and says, you know what? A lot of your auto manufacturing are U.S. companies, and this is going to hurt your Canadian auto workers that build cars for American companies. So yeah, I could see a phone call being placed to Mr. Trudeau, and
So now there are tariffs in Europe, but China's BYD's begun selling its Dolphin compact hatchback for less than $30,000 in some EU markets, and its Seagull, which is even lower, is being sold for less than $20,000 in some markets. And that's the one that's under $10,000 in the Chinese market.
Yeah.
So even with those tariffs, they're still being sold fairly cheaply. So anyways, I want to move on to my main topic for today. And this is talking about stuff that's been going on with the Inflation Reduction Act. And this has been out for a couple of years. And despite the fact that it does nothing to address the name of the act, it's been fairly beneficial for the EV space, and it's been good for manufacturing jobs. There's been a lot of positive effects of the Inflation Reduction Act, other than in reducing inflation, which I said before. It's like, what a horrible name. I don't know what you're supposed to call it, but it's created.
Whatever gets it passed through the Republican-controlled House. That's what that was about.
Well, I mean, it certainly has done a good job in creating jobs in the green space. It's helping American manufacturers try to keep up with what's going on overseas, because only Tesla seems to be taking the situation seriously in the electric vehicle space, and so it's had it. But I was doing some research this morning, and this is coming from the U.S. Treasury Inspector General's office, and this is a chart on spending. So this is as of March 24. So I was looking at some conversations on LinkedIn, and people were talking about they didn't realize that the IRA still had money left, and in reality, of the 57.8 billion in allocated IRA funds, only 5.7 billion of that money has been spent. That's only 1/10, and this is showing where the money. So the dark blue is what has been spent, and the light blue is the unspent amount in those categories. So some of this is for enforcement of different things. Some of them is for operations support. A lot of this seems to be related to the IRS, but there was a significant amount of money released. For instance, a few billion for automobiles, and this was specifically for the IRS to use this section of money, and they really haven't used the money. So that's been a little different. And then I've got another article, and this is coming from whitehouse.gov. And this is dated about on the 16th of August. So this is
fairly
less
recent.
so it's less than 2 weeks ago. 2 years in, the Inflation Reduction Act is lowering costs for millions of Americans, tackling the climate crisis, and creating jobs. It's not done a lot for the lowering cost part, but I feel it's done a lot for the climate crisis and creating jobs. Because as we've looked at, it's created tens of thousands of jobs, almost all in Republican-led states that like manufacturing, Georgia, the Carolinas, things like that. But in the 2 years since it was signed into law, now it says just yesterday, so it would have been August 15th, the president and vice president announced that for the first time in history, Medicare successfully negotiated lower prescription drug prices, which will save millions of seniors, people with disabilities, and other Medicare beneficiaries over $1.5 billion out of pocket in the first year. Now, what I don't understand, what has Medicare been doing for the last however long it's existed? It's not been negotiating for lower prescription drug prices.
It couldn't. That's what was so monumental about signing that agreement. That we would like to have done that, but it was politics being what politics is. They couldn't do it until they got here, and this allowed them to begin to go doing those negotiations. So
this makes zero sense that this has been going on for years.
Oh no, kidding!
Zero sense.
No kidding.
Now let's see.
And that's politics in America.
Millions of Americans are saving an average of $800 per year on health insurance premiums because of cost savings from the American Rescue Plan that the IRA extended, helping drive the nation's uninsured rate to historic lows. 4 million seniors save money on insulin because of the law's
Oh no,
cap
it's
at
not many.
$35.
Yeah.
Now, it was that at one point, that was rescinded and then it brought back again. So that one is a little, whatever. The IRS successfully piloted direct file in 12 states, saving 140,000 people and estimated 5.6 million in tax prep services. And that's a pretty decent thing. It does seem wrong that people have to spend money when they have to get help with taxes because taxes are so complicated.
Oh God, yes.
Um,
I got some stories I could tell you about my taxes. That's just
yeah, we won't get into the
we
tax
won't
thing.
get into that. No, 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 no.
All of a sudden, you'll see me get very angry. So, yeah, last year, 3.4 million Americans benefited from an 8.4 billion in Inflation Reduction Act tax credits to lower the cost of clean energy and energy efficiency upgrades in their house, significantly outpacing projections of the popularity of the tax credits in just the first year they were available. There's all kinds of incentives for various things that you can do to make your homes more
Yeah.
energy efficient. And a lot of
Yeah.
people have taken advantage of that. Now, it says the 3.4 million Americans, a lot of that I've commented like, I'm not so sure that solar isn't a scam in the United States. I think solar is a great thing, but the way that these solar companies handle selling it,
Mhm.
it's so overpriced that, and then you got this massive tax credit that comes along with, I think it's 28% of the tax of it is a tax credit, and there's issues with that. 250,000 Americans have now claimed the electric vehicle credit through August. That saved buyers about 1.5 billion total. That's either the 7,500 or half of that, which is 3,750 on new vehicles, or 4,000 up to $4,000 on used vehicles. Let's see. 900 billion in clean energy and manufacturing investments in the US. So this isn't government money being spent. This is investment from companies into the United States. 265 billion in clean energy investment since the IRA was signed into law. So apparently some of this was already coming. This is what's actually been spent. This is what's been announced. Okay. And it's creating 330,000 new jobs in the United States, according to an outside group. That's a pretty big deal. That's probably the single biggest accomplishment of the Inflation Reduction Act. Economically distressed areas are poised to benefit the most from these investments. 99% of high poverty counties in the United States are benefiting from an Investing in America project funded by the IRA, Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or CHIPS and Science Act. Since the Inflation Reduction Act passed, 75% of private sector clean energy investments have flowed to counties with lower than median household incomes, and clean energy investments in energy communities. Clean energy investment in energy communities has doubled. Yeah, so anyways, there's been a lot of pretty cool things that have happened there. I've seen, some talk about how they're helping with some costs on health insurance benefits, or trying to cap benefits, but it looked like it's something that's costing about 8 billion a year to help make happen. But a lot of those things are good. It just, like I said, not a one of them did anything to stop inflation. That was
Yeah, but well, yeah. How do you do that?
well, so the biggest way
Because
to
there's
cut,
so many, there's so many drivers that cause inflation. How do you pick one? There's no one silver bullet that'll deal with all of it.
you reduce government spending. That's the easiest way to reduce inflation, is to reduce government spending, because that constrains the money supply, and then there's not as much money available for the consumption of goods and services. So I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing. We don't need all those government employees to starve, right? But I'm just saying that is not how economics works. but that's okay. That's okay. Like I said, the IRA's done a lot of things to benefit. You look at all the years you've been doing EV world. Has there really been anything that's had this much effect in the past?
Oh, no, no, no. Well,
No.
yeah, the introduction of Tesla. That's probably been the spark, the catalyst that got so much of this going. The OEMs tried it, didn't have any kind of real serious success. When I first started in the early 2000s, nah. Soon as the Tesla came along, as soon as it hit the road, maybe going back even a little further to Nissan in 2010, but with Tesla, the things just that inspired everybody. So for that,
They made
I
it cool. Yeah.
they made it cool, and they made it practical, right? I mean, the OEMs were building cars with maybe, luckily, 100 miles range. Well, they all recognized that was an issue, that was a problem. Nobody wanted a car like that. And then Tesla came along and said, we can at least double that. And now where are we at? Triple that in most cases. So we're getting there, and it's the snowball is building. So for that, I give the crew at Tesla, heavy pat on the back for sparking that and getting it going. And then of course the government comes along and starts implementing these programs, which just adds more fuel to the fire. Is that the best way to describe
Yeah.
it?
Oh yeah. But this one was definitely the biggest move the
Oh yeah.
government's made.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And it was heavily criticized, but so many of the laws that come in when they're dropped in and they're 1,000 pages long, and nobody that's voting on them really knows what's going on, or what the consequences. Because that's the biggest thing is so many laws. We could get into some of the stuff that LBJ passed that the effects have been so detrimental to society, yet nobody will ever go back and repeal that. You just don't know. Lots of laws are passed in good faith, and you don't understand the serious outcomes of the nature of them,
Yeah.
maybe for another 10, 20
Well,
years, or whether they were good or bad.
yeah, maybe that's where AI will help us. Going forward, we can subject proposed laws and things. Say, hey, tell us what are the potential ramifications of this going forward, and what are the loopholes that the guys we don't want exploiting it exploit. So I mean, like I said, I had really sitting down and having a conversation this morning with an artificial intelligence, right, with a machine learning algorithm that was giving me all this information about thorium and where it comes from and how it works and how the uranium is injected to make it make it effective for producing heat, and how that heat is used, and how they generate power. I mean, that's fascinating. I spent, I think, it's a good half hour or longer just having a conversation with a machine that was telling me all this thing that I would need a personal nuclear energy expert sitting across the table from me explaining this to me. I've got this thing at my fingertip now, so I'm
It's
excited about
amazing
it.
sometimes.
It is just
There's a
amazing.
lot of things that I have questions about, and I'm really not sure about, you know, um, how biased some articles are going to be. Not that AI isn't biased. Holy crap! There's certainly been some bias. When the whole Gemini project came out and some of the stuff it was doing with art, but
Yeah.
you just
Well,
it's
I
amazing
don't
how
use it
much.
for art. Yeah, I use it for
I get it. All
mainly
right,
historical research, and like this conversation about thorium and how thorium works. So
so
I feel a
let's
lot
talk.
smarter.
There you go. Well, it certainly helps.
Yep.
Yeah, Bill needs to be smarter. So
Yeah.
we'll work on that. Yeah, we're always learning. Let's talk about the EV crash situation. And isn't saying that there's a bad problem with EVs crashing.
No.
It's
No.
just kind of going into some statistics on vehicles. And
It's
honestly, some of the graphs and charts on this article are not well labeled.
no.
Okay, so
No.
I'll try to explain them as best we can as we get into this. But electric vehicles are becoming more common and sort of getting involved in crashes. Now, this is a study done by the firm Levine and Wiss, who analyzed the number of most searched electric vehicles involved in crash and fatal crashes, as well as each model unit sold. The crash rate for 10,000 cars sold was then calculated to identify the EVs with the highest accident rates. Now, these numbers, it's showing, I don't know what search engine searches really have to do with anything,
I'm
but
not
when
sure
it says
either.
total crashes of Lucid, this was
Number
crashes where
one.
somebody died. No, where somebody died. So Lucid had one crash where somebody died, but they had 52 crashes per 10,000 vehicles, which was also the highest. They only sold about 2,000 cars. So this
Yep.
only represents what, 10 crashes, something like that. 10 crashes. Yeah, about 10 cars crashed and one of them had a fatality. Okay. But we get down here, Volkswagen, 2 fatalities, 15 crashes per 10,000. And we get down to some of these numbers, it's interesting to see. So Hyundai Ioniq had 36 people die, but they had 5 crashes. So, but they sold way more cars. You look at this, they sold
Oh yeah.
23,000
Yeah.
versus that. So they sold 10 times as many cars, but is the Ioniq a little less safe? Is a little bit less safe for the driver. Now we get here then to the Model 3 had 147 people die in crashes, but there was 800,000 sales, but it's even lower crashes per 10,000, only 5 per 10,000. So 1/10 the rate of this, but what is this? 400 times as many sales. So in reality, this death rate is lower than the Lucid Air death rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they don't give that statistic. They don't give
Yeah,
that the Model S.
it's really confusing, how they've done that. And I thought, well, you've only had one accident out of 2,000 cars you've saw. I mean, I don't know how you arrive at that. And of course, the safest by their definition is the Porsche Taycan. So I don't know,
And they don't even
how.
give that in this chart.
No,
So the Porsche,
it's not even in the chart. It's in the text of the document. So
right? I saw that, and the Taycan only had 0.06 accidents per 10,000 vehicles. So somehow in these figures, their number was 0.06 versus say Tesla's 4.87.
yeah,
So somehow they just didn't get in accidents,
yeah, it's
which was
well, maybe I was thinking about this. Well, maybe it's because typically the people that buy Porsches tend to be very driver focused. That's kind of the reason they have it is because they enjoy driving. They're maybe more experienced drivers, and so maybe that's part of the answer. I don't know, nothing to verify that, but I would that might account for it that they're just better
maybe
drivers.
people try to avoid hitting them.
Or maybe the driver's a little more careful because this is really an expensive car I'm driving. So I
Right,
don't
right.
know.
It's kind of fascinating how that one was really low. It almost seems like there was some kind of anomaly with that.
Yeah,
That maybe there just really weren't that many Taycans sold, and it's just leaving an anomaly like this.
and
Hyundai
maybe
Kona. Look at this number. There was only 2 fatalities out of 350,000 vehicles sold on the Hyundai Kona. Somehow, the Kona just really, for as many as are on the road, people just didn't get into fatal crashes.
no idea.
Um,
It's a mystery.
I mean, the Chevy Bolt number for fatalities is pretty damn low.
It's pretty low too.
80,
Yeah,
yeah, 21, and the Leaf at 26. The fascinating one, though, so the Y is considered to be the safest car made for the passengers. And they still had 49 fatalities out of over 400,000 made, but it had a fairly low crash per 10,000, 4.14. But when you start comparing this, though, to the Hyundai Kona, I mean, the Kona looks so much safer, but we don't know what else. I mean, we do
yeah,
know, like we saw the picture of that Tesla Model Y flipping through the air in China, and we've heard the story of the people that drove off the cliff and survived in the Model 3,
yeah.
So,
Doctor's
you know,
family. Yeah,
yeah. Um, It's interesting. Lucid Air had, and I don't get what this has to do with anything. It had Lucid Air had a 1.1 million monthly search volume, indicating high public interest despite its high
Well,
accident rate. I'm
that's
like,
well, maybe that's they're what they're doing is said, look, we've got all these cars out there. Let's limit it. Our search parameters, limit it to the top 10 cars that show up on searches, on Google, and that's how they determined which ones they're going to report, rather than reporting on the Cadillac Elise or the Hummer or any of those. We'll just limit it to the ones that are the most searched for, and that's how
yeah, I mean,
they.
look at this. So the Tesla Model 3 far and away at 10.3 million monthly searches, is far and away the most
Oh yeah,
popular to search for.
yeah.
It's funny. The other ones, if you look at the amount of searches for the Tesla models, the other ones start looking like search anomalies.
Yeah.
The Mazda MX-30, 43,000 searches
Oh
versus
yeah.
a Model Y at 5.4 million. Oh, so I mean that's
Well, there is an upside to Musk's antics.
right.
Good looking cars, and Elon Musk and his antics. So it pulls.
Anyways, all right. Well, I think that's enough to cover for today.
Yeah,
I had some other
enough
articles
to make.
I'm going to save for Mike for
Yeah,
tomorrow.
yeah. If you
So,
get a chance, talk to see if I sent that long list of responses from Pi to Mike as well. So you guys might
okay.
have an more educated discussion on this, because I'm not an electrical engineer.
Mhm.
Hell, I'm not even a decent writer, but
Mm.
anyway, it'd be
Well,
interesting to see what.
I appreciate everybody watching today. We had a pretty good crowd today. Ever since the Twitter changes, this is pretty good viewership for an episode.
Yeah.
Since Twitter made those changes a couple months ago. Anyways, all right, everyone, have a great day. And Bill and I'll be back on Thursday. I'll be back with Mike tomorrow.